Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm joined with a new guest. His name is Levi. He's just gonna be awkwardly staring at me the whole time, but I am so excited for today's video. Today I will be talking about my favorite books that I read in 2019. This is actually a great reading year for me. I read 27 books, which I know doesn't sound like a lot compared to other booktubers, but I really had zero expectations starting out this year. I really didn't think that I was going to start reading again, but it just kind of found its way. So I'm really proud of that. So I thought about talking about 10 books, but I really didn't read enough to pick 10 that I really recommend. So I'm going to stick with 5. I know I'm a little bit late. We're already like a week into January, but this is really like the only time I could film. I haven't had that much time recently, but I've still been reading a lot. So anyways, I will talk about my top 5 books of the year. The first one, of course, being The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. I finally picked this up and read this year, and of course fell in love. I'll do a short synopsis of each book, but this is kind of historical fiction. I'm sure you know what it's about, but historical fiction is also my favorite. That was also the recurring theme of this year. But this follows the whole entire life of a man named Cyril in Ireland. He was born in the 1950s, and it literally starts with his conception and goes to his death. And most of all, I'm just so impressed with John Boyne's writing. I can't believe he wrote this huge book about this one man's life, and I was never bored. I never lost interest. I was never confused. Like, everything just flowed so beautifully, and it's such a beautiful story, and I was a bubbling mess at the end, just sobbing my eyes out. So I really can't recommend this book enough. I'm gonna give it to everyone I know because it's so good, and it is a little bit daunting, but it took me like 2 days to read because it's just such good writing and such a beautiful story. You can't put it down. So, Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. Up next is This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger, and these 2 books actually made it to my all-time favorite books book list, so that's a pretty big deal. They're pretty good. So again, kind of historical fiction. This follows the life of 2 brothers who are kind of in this boarding school. It's mainly used for Native American kids whose parents were killed by the government and stuff, and so they are white. They are the only white boys there because they are orphans, and this takes place in the 1930s. They escape from this boarding school and go on a wild adventure down the Missouri River, I believe. But this is such a good adventure story if you're into that type of thing. It's kind of like Stand By Me meets Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And, you know, it follows their journey down this river, all these different characters they meet, all these little towns that they run across. And it's so good. There's a little bit of magic in it, which I actually really liked. It was just a tiny bit, but oh, I read this book quite recently in October, and I'm so glad that I did. It like quickly became my favorite. I just flew through it. I love reading about adventure stories and things like that. So, This Tender Land. So the next 3 I really can't put in an order of any kind. So let's talk about Summer of '69 by Ellen Hilderbrand. This is the dark horse of the year. This is my biggest surprise of 2019. I picked this up. I thought it would be kind of like a summer read, like kind of mushy and frilly, and maybe like a rom-com, maybe a romance. I really didn't know, but I'm so happy I picked it up. Okay, so it takes place obviously during the summer of '69. Again, historical fiction. And it follows the story of this family and kind of every family member within that family, like the 3 siblings. A lot happened in summer of '69. We have the Vietnam War, we have the moon landing, we have a lot of presidential stuff that happens, and so it kind of goes through these characters' lives and talks about those big events as well. And this also has multiple perspective storylines, which I also found to be a running theme throughout this year that I actually really like. I like seeing different perspectives and kind of how they all tie together. I can't really say anything else. I love this story, and it really caught me by surprise, and I would highly recommend. This was such a beautiful book. Highly, highly recommend Summer of '69. Up next is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Again, I'm late on this train. This came out a few years ago and everyone loved it. I also read Daisy Jones and the Six. Unpopular opinion, but I did like this one more. I thought this one like had more substance. I don't know. I just fell in love with this book more so than the other one that she came out with recently, but they're both amazing. So this follows the story of a fictional character named Evelyn Hugo. She was an old Hollywood star, kind of like Marilyn Monroe. I almost said Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Monroe. And she's always had a lot of mystery around her life. Obviously, she's had 7 husbands. And so she's pretty old, and she calls upon this journalist to come and interview her and finally talk about her life. Again, I cannot get over the writing. I read this book, and my brain could not compute that like Evelyn Hugo is not a real person. Afterwards, I did intense Google searches being like, are you sure Evelyn Hugo is not a real human? Because the way that these characters are just so full of color and life, and they're so complex, and I just couldn't get over that they were fake. Same with Daisy Jones and the Six. I was looking up their music. I was like, there's no way that these characters are not real. She writes so brilliantly, and there's a lot of important topics in this book as well that are seen through this life-telling of Evelyn Hugo. What a book! Okay, so the last book I want to talk about is A Woman Is No Man by Etaf Rum. This follows the story of 3 different generations of a Palestinian family, the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter. And so the mother immigrated over from Palestine, and the grandmother came over as well, and they had the daughter. And it just talks about how this daughter is juggling these different cultures. You know, they're very different, and she really has to find her individuality and kind of go against what her mother and grandmother want for her life. Like marrying young and having kids, that's kind of what's expected, and she really wants to go against this and kind of talks about her struggles. And I love books, of course, with like powerful women, and it's just a really, really deep and emotional story. Etaf Rum also has a similar story of immigrant parents from Palestine living in Brooklyn, and so I'm sure there's some similarities between her struggles and the characters that she talks about. But also, I think this book wins for most beautiful cover of 2019 for me. It is so beautiful and so satisfying to look at. I can't get enough. Anyways, such a beautiful book and such a good insight into seeing, you know, this Arab culture that isn't really talked about that much. I think it's kind of like taboo to talk about. So many intimate memories and intimate, you know, kind of rules, and it was, again, such a good book. Of course, it would be. It's my top 5 of 2019, but yeah, those are my top 5 favorite books of the year. I'm really curious as to see what you guys' favorite book of the year was. Again, for me, it was a pretty good reading year. I'm really, really pleased with the books that I got into, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys!